This is how we do grocery shopping now.
This is one of the most obvious manifestations of a changing climate. More unstable weather conditions, dumps about a year's worth of moisture in a day or two.
You just have to have enormous respect for the river because it can sweep you up and under and against something in an instant.
Flooding in 4 provinces tested who we as Canadians are as neighbours. States of emergencies, evacuations, devastating loss. Today on Context, we take a look at the people in those communities coping in the aftermath of disaster. It's difficult to imagine after Cyclone Idai's path of destruction through Mozambique in March 2019. But the country was hit again, this time by Cyclone Kenneth, another Category 4. Idai was one of the worst tropical cyclones on record to affect Africa and the Southern Hemisphere. The death toll is still rising as aid workers travel to remote places in the hardest hit areas. This most recent Cyclone Kenneth flattened villages, destroyed up to 35,000 homes. Joseph Camara joins us from World Vision, and he's on the ground. Joseph, what is the latest on the situation there?
The situation is still precarious, in both areas that were affected by the twin cyclones, Idai and Kenneth. In Cyclone Idai affected areas, we are still finding communities that were cut off because of poor infrastructure, but also because they naturally didn't have roads to those places. In Cyclone Kenneth affected areas, which is still fresh, the situation is very precarious. As you know, most areas, especially the island of Ibo, was wiped out. The district of Macomia was completely wiped out. So houses in those areas were fully wiped out. There are lots of people still in those areas. That's where they are living with very basic facilities.
Joseph, how common is it for a cyclone to hit an area twice in a short period of time?
We don't have a history in this part of the world and across Africa where a cyclone has hit twice the same country and closer to the same path. So this is a bit unique and never experienced before. I haven't heard about it in other areas or in other regions where it has happened. So the chances were close to zero, are very unheard of. So it was a very unfortunate situation to experience these twin cyclones.
How are the people coping?
The people, I would say the people of Mozambique are resilient people. They are trying their best to pick up the pieces and rebuild their lives. Every day people are trying to rebuild houses. They are trying to pick up the pieces and get different pieces and put together and make life continue, pretend as if life is normal. But they have accepted the situation.
What are some of the biggest challenges foreign aid workers are facing?
When Cyclone Kenneth hit, we were faced with the challenge to move part of our staff, our capacities to the Cyclone Kenneth hit areas and to share resources because we don't have that much funding for both cyclones. So we're trying as much as possible to share what we have in both areas. So making sure that we make the right decisions, but also we share the little that is available is challenging, especially for staff, for aid workers, working non-stop. We work 7 days a week. We work up to, I've never left work before 8 p.m. And some of my colleagues work much more longer hours depending on where you are. It is very challenging, very tough. But I know that also they face a host of disease threats like malaria and cholera. Is very, very challenging and scary.
How can we help the people of Mozambique right now?
I ask the world to pray for the people of Mozambique that this will be over, the recovery will be quicker. I don't know how realistic that is, but I believe that by prayer this is possible. So please pray for recovery of Mozambique. Please pray for the aid workers involved in responding, that they may have the good health and the motivation and the strength to continue. Please pray for the government of Mozambique to continue being receptive to the support and the aid workers' ideas and support that they are providing. I pray for good health too. Other than that, I also appeal to the people all over the world that we really need to consider our thoughts about climate change. This phenomenon is unique, and I believe it's because of climate change. The cyclones came at the back of a drought that had devastated this area for some time. So you can imagine from one disaster to another. This has not been the case before, but unfortunately, this is what we are faced with. And unfortunately, it's the poorest of the people, of the poor, who have absolutely no idea about what's happening to their world, that are experiencing the worst of climate change.
Joseph, thank you for joining us. Our hearts and prayers are with you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Last month, Rio de Janeiro saw 1 month's worth of rainfall in just 4 hours. At least 10 people died in that. And here in Canada, floods hit Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick with a vengeance. Context producer Susan Ponting was in Ottawa just after the floods hit the region. Here are just a few of the stories from homeowners, businesses, and aid workers, and what they are doing in the aftermath of the cleanup.
We were organizing a surf competition to begin with on Saturday, and with the state of our city the way it was and the water levels super high, we decided to postpone the competition and come and help out. 2017 was bad and no one was prepared for that. I think we were a little bit more expecting this, but then when they said that it was going to go above the 2017 flood levels, I couldn't believe it. Our team spread out into different locations. We saw people kind of scrambling. Most had put sandbags down, but then as the water levels creeped up, what was happening was waves that were coming in were smashing down the walls of sandbags, and they couldn't keep up because their basements and floors were flooding, and they were trying to pump the water out. And so what we mainly did was once it got too deep for a person in rubber boots to go out in, we would go out with rowboats and canoes filled with sandbags. We also were able to work with the military too, and that was really great to have the military come down, and they kind of provided a little bit more structure and order, and they just have the resources and the expertise. And so we jumped in with their group and just kind of followed along.
What's been remarkable for you seeing the community all band together?
It gets very personal very quickly, and we were meeting with strangers who I just met, and they were giving hugs, and really you felt a connection with people because everyone was struggling. And so you'd arrive on site and there'd be someone saying, okay, go and do this and go and do that, and you'd think that they were a resident, and then you find out that they'd just arrived 2 days before and had never been to the community. So that was quite touching to see.
You have great respect for the water, but how powerful is it?
The river is incredibly humbling, and we've learned a lot from the kayaking community, who takes safety very seriously. And so part of our message is that the river is always more powerful than you, and that it just has to, you just have to have enormous respect for the river, because it can sweep you up and under and against something in an instant.
My yard is full of water right now. It's not as bad as last year. It makes it no less stressful.
These are senior citizens. 90% of the people in here are all retired. They have nothing. I'm lucky. All I'm missing is water. I still got a house. Then they're ruined.
I'm trying to rationalize it, but in the morning I just feel like crying, but after that I get into the work and I keep going on.
These are devastating pictures we are seeing. What do you do as chaplaincy, as a spiritual caregiver, in this kind of loss and need?
Struggling with that type of loss is very difficult for people, and it depends on the person. I would recommend that they talk to someone, be able to verbalize it. Was it a sentimental loss or was it a material loss? I would also recommend that they just really think about what they have left. Sometimes it's hard to do, to realize that they're still alive and that they still have things left as well.
What's your advice as someone who takes a hand out to man, hand out to God, hand up to God is the Salvation Army's motto. How should people grasp on to both of those hands?
People can grasp both those hands from the Salvation Army because we do provide practical support and emotional and spiritual support. The Salvation Army has trained personnel on the ground who are skilled to be able to come alongside people in these difficult times and support them. It might be a handout with a bottle of water. It might be a tap on the shoulder, just asking how you're coping. Those are the ways that we come alongside and help people.
What might be the best way we can live out God's love for our Canadian neighbours who did not fare so well?
The Salvation Army can't do what we do without the generous support of our public. And if you'd like to support to keep our relief efforts going, you can go to salvationarmy.ca/flood response.
This is one of the most obvious manifestations of a changing climate. More unstable weather conditions where you can get precipitation that dumps about a year's worth of moisture in a day or two, and then it all floods and causes enormous damage to private property as well as public infrastructure, as well as the economy.
Well, Canada's best-known climatologist, David Phillips, says what we're experiencing is not our grandparents' weather. Let's talk about that. What do we mean by that phrase?
Well, everyone's going to be affected by it. Every season, every region, no one's going to escape it. I think it's going to give us weather that seems more extreme than we're used to, more frequent, more impactful kind of storms, events, floods, drought, you name it. There's no one going to be left out in the cold. I think everyone's going to feel it. We're already beginning to feel the effects of climate change. We're seeing the data, but we've already had the impacts. We're seeing people being strongly affected by weather that they feel that they haven't seen before. It's certainly not the weather of our grandparents or our parents. It seems to be different kind of conditions that we're facing, and we're being challenged by it.
Were the recent floods in Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, and New Brunswick a direct effect of climate change?
You know, it's a very difficult question. I mean, we certainly know we've had floods before, and I think that certainly we're going to continue to have floods. I think what's different about this is the fact that we know that we're getting more precipitation from the atmosphere. I mean, that is a direct effect of climate change. But I think that it's not only as the weather changed, but we have changed, you and I in society. We're living where we shouldn't be living, in floodplains and avalanche zones and by the sea. We also have changed the land use. We're opening up areas that should have been just wetlands and swamplands. I mean, we think progress is hardening surfaces and building cities. And of course, this changes the water balance. And so my sense is that we're seeing these things because we have changed, but also because the climate has changed.
What surprises you most as a climatologist?
Well, I think it's the fact that we think we can engineer our way out of things. We can put a man on the moon. We can do amazing things with science and engineering, but it really still is, nature is all powerful. You know, we see so many examples of it day after day, week after week, from far off places in the world and even in our own backyard. You know, we're vulnerable to the extremes of weather, and I think what we need to do is have balance in our lives. We need to understand that weather is changing. We need to do things not just to abandon the old ways and think about how nature protects us and offers us wonderful opportunities. But so my sense is that I think we have to get back to where we accept the fact that nature is a protector of us, and we have to embrace that and do things differently.
For those who believe climate change isn't real, what can you say to them based on what is happening in the world now?
Well, you know, I think the science is overwhelming. You know, you can't get scientists to agree on anything. But 98% of the scientists of the world think that the world is warming up faster and greater now than it has in a long time. The evidence is irrefutable. And I think that even some deniers are accepting the fact that, hey, the climate is changing. I mean, they think it's always changing. And I think that we need to begin to think seriously about it, because for for the security of the planet, for the future of our children. We need to do things differently. We need to learn better how to live with nature, and not just think that we're almighty control of it. That we need to really understand that, hey, there's you need to be thinking environmentally safe, and also, and it doesn't have to be a job killer. It's not an economic killer. I think we can have good economics, good jobs, and good environment at the same time.
Can climate change be reversed?
You know, that's a good question. I think it can't. I think it can be slowed down. We're clearly committed to a warmer world. I mean, all of the greenhouse gases that people emit today going to work or school are going to be there in 100 years from now. So we know, but by properly providing, cutting back on our fossil fuels, we can maybe buy some time and to learn how to deal with changes in a better way. But I think that we need to also accept the fact that we need to adapt. We need to do things differently than our grandparents did to provide safe and secure neighborhoods and areas where we live. I think we need to learn to live with nature and not try to conquer it.
David Phillips of Environment Canada, thank you for your time.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
You're watching Context Beyond the Headlines.
My name is Catherine Hayhoe, and I am a climate scientist and a professor at Texas Tech University.
Part of the reason why I do what I do is because climate change exacerbates humanitarian issues.
I get attacked on a daily basis for simply standing up and sharing the truth of what God's creation is telling us. Often, too, you feel like what you have to say is falling on deaf ears. But I really truly believe that each of us can engage in the work that God is doing in this world. And today, I do believe that that work includes telling people about raising awareness of and acting on a changing climate. One of the biggest questions I often get is, well, I'm just one person. Why do my actions matter? And that's why I think it's important to recognize that one of the most important things every single one of us can do, no matter who we are, how old we are, where we live, is talk about it. Dismissive people are people rejecting the reality of a changing climate and the need for solutions is so integral to who they are, their personal identity, that if an angel from God appeared before them with tablets of stone saying global warming is real in foot-high letters of flame, they would still dismiss that. How do we know what's the right thing to do? That doesn't have so much to do with our heads as it does to our hearts. And for many of us, what's in our hearts really truly is informed by our faith. As a Christian, I believe that God gave us responsibility over every living thing on this planet, as it says in Genesis. But even more importantly, I believe we are to love others as God loved us. And climate change really is a profoundly unjust issue because it disproportionately affects the poorest and most vulnerable people, even here at home as well as around the world. Although it's difficult sometimes to find hope, what I do is I look for that hope. I look for that hope in people, what people are doing, what's happening around the world, what's happening in the places where I live. There's little bits of hope everywhere if we look for it, but we have to go out and look for that hope.
Still ahead on Contact's special coverage, communities coping the aftermath of disaster. 1 year ago, the Toronto van attack made news headlines around the world. We check in on neighborhoods who have band together to make sense of their incredible loss. And when a lone gunman opened fire on a warm summer evening, the Toronto Danforth community known as Greektown was thrown into turmoil. We get an update from some neighbors who are still grappling with the profound effects of the incident. On a beautiful summer evening in 2018, a lone gunman opened fire in a Toronto neighborhood known as Greektown. Almost a year later, the community is still coping with the tragedy that left 2 people dead. 10-year-old Juliana Kozis was out for an ice cream with her family after dinner, and 18-year-old Reese Fallon was celebrating her friend's birthday that night. This is the story about how some of the people in the Greektown community are coping in the aftermath of that dreadful tragedy.
So sad, because it could have been anybody, your heart just breaks. There's no words. So sad.
Right after the shooting, there was a sense of disbelief and shock. Some people were very angry that this would happen to their community. It's a very close-knit community. Danforth community is very close-knit, and so people needed each other and needed to lean on each other during that time period. And so the mood was very much really hurt. People were really hurting. Monday morning, I got a phone call from two of the people in our church. One's a counselor and one works with Toronto Public Health, and asked if they could just go out in the street and be the presence of calm and peace on the street to those who were needing a shoulder to cry on. And both of them have some great training. Other people got involved in just talking to their neighbors. A lot of people in our congregation, most of the people in our congregation actually live within 1 kilometer radius of this church. Within 24 hours, we had the rapid response team from the Billy Graham organization and Samaritan's Purse here set up their mobile command unit, and they helped us as we went out on the streets throughout the week. The entire week, we actually were out on the streets talking with people, even praying with shop owners and talking to shop owners throughout that entire week. I really feel that people have, in some ways, moved on, and they're stronger, actually. I think this community is actually stronger together because of this, and because they pulled together so quickly. And so I would say that, yes, we need to remember, but I also believe that people are stronger, and I think there's a lot stronger togetherness in this community that I actually haven't seen before.
A major tragedy broke out on the streets of Toronto when a man drove his truck down Toronto's Yonge Street, killing 10 people and injuring many more. Sheldon Neal now with a story of how that community is building care.
Take us back to that day.
So I had just finished lunch on Yonge Street, walked to my home, which is 5 minutes away, and immediately someone called me who I'd run into over lunch, and she said she'd seen bodies falling on Yonge. She didn't know what had happened, but she had quickly taken her young child and left the scene. Within 25 minutes, there was a video already of the arrest of the perpetrator. So it happened very quickly, but just, even though it was quick, the wound went very deep, right? Because this is my neighborhood.
Do you feel a sense of worry or uncertainty at any time when you're walking down, common streets, busy streets like this, or community areas as a result of what happened?
Yeah, so, I mean, these are the streets I take my kids down. I pushed my stroller here, had picnics here with my kids when they were really small. And definitely now I'm much more aware. I don't walk and not, look and listen to what's happening. So I'm definitely more aware, maybe more, guarded. But on the other hand, life is busy and life is meant to be lived, right? So I'm still participating in my community. I'm not going to hide because these things have happened.
Many would ask, how does a faith in God apply in such times of uncertainty when tragedy strikes without warning? How does your personal faith bolster your ability to keep living?
I think it goes back to knowing that God is in control, and it's that paradox that we have free will, there is evil, so He allows for things to happen. It doesn't mean He causes them to happen, but because we have our hope in God, we don't live in fear, and we know that even if we were to lose our life at this very moment, we do have the promise of eternal life with Him. So we don't have to live in the same kind of fear where you don't know, what's going to happen. But definitely, I think without a faith, something like evil could be crippling.
We do not run away, we run to help others.
How has people of faith, pastors, churches united on the aftermath of a tragedy like this?
So I think that the greatest obstacle to unity of the church, the Big C church, is actually not theology, but infrastructure. Because we're not connected, it's hard for us to respond collectively to a situation. But luckily, you know, after the Toronto van attack, that night, a group of us, mostly pastors and leaders from this community, came together and we started a movement called We Love Willowdale. And basically, we said to the city and the officials, we want to serve our community. And we built infrastructure for collaboration. You know, we organized a prayer vigil, we organized a moment of silence the day after the attack. We also organized a community picnic and a Reclaim Young walk that happened down Yonge Street, where even our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took part. So the church was very much united and working together to bring healing to our community, and that was our heart. And we're so excited because we actually, because of all of this, have recently formed an official group called the Willowdale Church Coalition. And our hope is that we can build some infrastructure that one day can be scalable and shareable so that other churches and other communities would also be able to be more united in a very practical way, because that is, I think, how we can be salty and be light in our community, is to really be able to have a collective impact. I think if we're siloed, it's very hard for us to serve our community well together.
Well, if all this evidence of communities in crisis has motivated you like it's motivated me, just a reminder that it takes all of us rolling up our sleeves and getting out there and actually doing something, making a phone call, giving a donation, getting involved, volunteering, learning more about the situation. You can do that when you read up about these at our website at Context, and check it out and think how you can be part of making a better tomorrow for all of those communities affected by crisis. For all of us at Context, I'm Lorna Duick. Thanks for joining us.
You can use media to propagate bad just as you can use it to propagate good. It's about, no, we have to create a value system that people can actually be proud of.
The key thing is to keep the facts alive, which is what journalism does. The next step is, well, what do we know, and then what do we do?
I don't think anyone took the time to make it a racial crime.
I said, Daddy's gone, but we're going to follow Jesus and we're going to see him again.
Between 700,000 and 1 million Canadians are currently addicted.
Context is needed as a broker between the various Christian voices within Canada. It promotes a fantastic dialogue.
So many people have lost their life. This is about protecting our children.
I would like to see the government try to address the small business aspect to it.
The greatest force to motivate people to live in the world differently is their religion.
A new day is on the horizon.
The problem is people are not following the teachings of their faith.
If God is the God of all creation, then that includes science.